Good morning, students. I am Dr. Kamala, Assistant Professor of Political Science, New Government Degree College, Serilingampally, Ranga Reddy District, Telangana. Today, we are going to discuss about the emergence of Indian National Congress. Now, in the previous class, we have discussed what are the reasons for the rise of Indian national movement. We have discussed about the British colonial rule and the Great Revolt of 1857, which was a major reason for the outbreak of the Indian national movement, and the impact of English education system, and the impact of the newspapers, right, and the economic exploitation and acute economic system. Not only that, but also the socio-religious reformative movements also played a pivotal role in the emergence of Indian national movement. So today we will discuss about the emergence of Indian National Congress, which has also become one of the reason for the rise of Indian national movement. Emerged Indian National Congress has emerged on 28th December 1885 as a movement against British rule, and its ultimate goal was Swaraj. And with 72 delegates in Bombay, has conducted a gathering to discuss about the problems of India, and also decided the problems which were faced by Indians should be brought to the notice of the British government. And this organization has played a major role in the organization of national movement in India, and the initiative was taken by retired civil service officer Alan Octavian Hume. Its aim was to obtain a greater share in government for educated Indians and to create a platform for civic and political dialogue between them and the British Raj. Right. Actually, its first meeting was to be held at Pune, but due to the outbreak of cholera over there, it was moved to Bombay. Now, the phases of Indian national movement, actually it was Dr. Ramesh Chandra, who is a great historian as well as a professor of Indian University, Indian history, popularly known as R.C. Majumdar, Ramesh Chandra Majumdar. And he has divided the history of Indian national movement into three phases, namely one moderate phase, that is from 1885 to 1905, and the extremist phase 1906 to 1919, and the Gandhian phase from 1920 to 1947. This you need to remember, students. It will become easier for you to remember. Okay, so the phases, because the questions might be asked on describe about the moderate phase or the extremist phase or the Gandhian phase. It will be asked separately. So you need to know the phases, right? And also the person who has divided the Indian national movement into three phases, right? Now we'll look please look at this slide. Now, who are generally the moderates, right? And the moderate period has began from 1885 to 1905. Now, actually, the Congress was led and controlled by the moderate nationalists during the period from 1885 to 1905. And the famous leaders were, or the famous moderates were, Dadabhai Nauroji, who used to be popularly known as the Grand Old Man of India, right? And Surendranath Banerjee, Feroz Shah Mehta, Gopal Krishna Gokhale, and others were included in this moderates, and they were very much famous for their simplicity and they used to follow the constitutional and peaceful methods to realize their achievements, right? And they were they considered the Britishers to be the real democrats and freedom lovers, and they molded the political consciousness of Indians in favor of British rule, and wanted to convince the British government by sending representations, petitions, and deputations, and they wanted to liberalize Indian society by introducing certain reforms. Now, the best possible way they believe was to favor self-rule and constitutional reforms. And the British rule as providential, and Indians were to be trained under its guidance. They strived for promoting strong nationalist feelings and political awareness among Indians on the basis of certain principles like sacrifice and hard work, and held discussions on the nature of Indian society and the alien rule, and they held discussions on the different in nature of Indian society, and they also clubbed the patriotism and loyalty to the British rule, and they also wanted the abolition of arms control to be repealed, and they wanted Swaraj within the British rule, and they also demanded for the abolition of tax and development of modern industries also. And they were they wanted these reforms to be brought in India in a slow and steady manner. Okay, so who are the moderates? Yes, Dadabhai Nauroji, Surendranath Banerjee, Feroz Shah Mehta, Gopal Krishna Gokhale. That you need to remember. And they used to be very slow and steady manner. They wanted to bring the reforms. See, it is also described as an era of reforms, right? And the moderate, see what I've discussed, the moderates desired reforms in a slow and steady manner, and also they believed in sacrifice and hard work for attaining self-rule, and aimed at peaceful reforms such as the enlargement of legislative councils, and not only that, the separation of the executive from the judiciary, and to increase the Indian representation in the councils. Now we'll see what are the methods generally that were followed by the moderates. They had complete faith in peaceful and constitutional reforms of Britishers, and they used press and annual sessions for propaganda. Okay, and not only that, they have organized meetings, speeches, resolutions, and positions for the opinion, and placed their views before the British Empire. Okay, so these are the methods which were followed by the moderates. Now we will look at extremist phase. Right. Now this phase has been described as the militant nationalist movement. Okay, this phase has been described what? Militant nationalist movement, and the prominent leaders of this phase were Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Lala Lajpat Roy, Bipin Chandra Pal, who were popularly known as Lal Bal Pal. Okay, and they strongly opposed the British rule and partition of Bengal. And not only that, they also criticized the mendicant policy of moderates. They followed the methods and advocated boycott of British goods, government schools, and colleges. Right. So now so they strongly opposed the British rule and partition of Bengal, and they had confidence in the benevolent policy of the British, and they considered that the methods of moderates does not yield any positive result, right? So according to moderates, what they did not believed in the methods what the moderates have been followed, because that according to them they won't yield any result, and they viewed that an able foreign government is less desirable than an inferior active government. Not only that, they proposed and practiced passive resistance policy against the Britishers, and see, the extremists have adopted the methods against the British rule, like boycott of British goods, honorary titles and legislative members, and patronizing native goods and industries, Swadeshi, right, and encouraging the native education and passive resistance. Now, in this phase, there was Home Rule movement, which was actually this movement was initiated under the leadership of Bal Gangadhar Tilak and Annie Besant. Annie Besant was one of the important leaders of Theosophical movement, right. And this movement was actually began in the year 1916. So, who has initiated this home rule movement? Yes, both Annie Besant and Bal Gangadhar Tilak. Right. Now, Annie Besant, you need to remember that she is one of the important leaders of the Theosophical movement, and this organization was movement was established at Madras and Pune in the year 1916. And the other leaders who have supported this home rule movement were Motilal Nehru, Tej Bahadur Sapru, Muhammad Ali Jinnah. So you need to remember, apart from Bal Gangadhar Tilak and Annie Besant, this movement was supported by Motilal Nehru, Tej Bahadur Sapru, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, who actually have supported this movement, and they have popularized slogans like Swadeshi, native education, and self-rule. And people had voluntarily joined the movement by donating their valuables and money for the organizing this movement. And the leaders have announced that home rule was nothing but a form of government under the under the British Empire, in which there would be no place for bureaucracy, and that administration should be uh, clean and responsible, right? And many factors like unification of two groups in the Congress, like Congress, that is the Congress and Muslim League Pact, and emphasis was laid on national self-determination during the First World War period, that is from which has taken in the period 1914 to 18, and dynamic leadership of Tilak and Annie Besant, and the change in the strategy of British government have led the movement very successful, and the British rulers also have realized the popularity of leaders of the Home Rule League. See, here you need to remember what are this is a movement which was taken under the dynamic leadership of Bal Gangadhar Tilak, who is an extremist leader, and who were actually opposed to the methods which were followed by the moderates, and they want to bring the changes in a revolutionary manner, and that's why the extremist phase is called as a militant phase also. And Annie Besant, who is also the one of the important leaders of the Theosophical movement, that you need to remember. And Tilak was prominent leaders at the times of First World War, and had strong opinions for the freedom of the country and its countrymen. Now, the other leaders already have discussed. They have popularized the slogans like Swadeshi, native education, and self-rule, and it was a form of government under the British Empire, in which there would be no place for bureaucracy and administration would be clean and responsible. Now, we will discuss about Congress Muslim League, which took uh, 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 place during the extremist period, and it is also known as the Lucknow Pact of 1916. Now, actually, this year 1916 can be or was a great significance in the Indian national movement. The two major political organizations, that is Indian National Congress and the Muslim Leagues, had held their meetings in Lucknow, okay, in December 1916. Now, both the parties, that is Indian National Congress and the Muslim League, have decided that the extremists and the moderates of the Congress, because they had differences of opinion, so that is the reason they have different opinions, and on this platform the extremists and the moderates of the Congress have agreed to reunite together uh, at the mediation of Annie Besant, and they favored to continue the spirit of Home Rule movement, which was launched by Annie Besant and Tilak. The uh, the at generally actually the reason was the attitude of British government towards the Muslims in Turkey during the First World War created an apprehension among the Indian Muslims with regard to their prospects in India under the British regime. This has led to the what Khilafat movement, and the prominent leaders were Maulana Abdul Kalam Azad and Muhammad Ali, who hinted actually the coordination and cooperation between the Hindus and Muslims. The subcommittees were set up by two parties, came out with proposals to be followed by the British government. The pact contained generally two important parts. One is for the first part was related to the Indian Muslims, and the second part comprises the constitutional reforms. Now, the pact actually called for the introduction of self-rule in India, special representation to Muslims in legislative bodies and legislative councils. Now, we will discuss about the Gandhian phase. Now, this phase is described as the non-violent period. Okay, this phase has been described as non-violent period. Now, the year 1920 is memorable, we can say, because in the history of Indian national movement and in the history of Indian National Congress, Gandhian phase has marked the memorable incidents in the history of Indian national movement, and during this period only Bal Gangadhar Tilak has passed away, and Gandhiji has become an important and undisputed leader of the Indian National Congress. And Mahatma Gandhi actually returned from South Africa where he fought for racial discrimination based on non-violence method, and was successful in achieving that movement in after that, on the uh, on receiving the letter of Gopal Krishna Gokhale, he came to India in 1915 to lead the Indian national movement, and because of his movements against see here because of his movements against racial restrictions in South Africa, he had already become a most popular and respected leader. And after coming to India, first he wanted to understand the people and their needs, and that is the reason he has made a tour to India. Hence, almost 1 year he has spent traveling India throughout the country. And his earliest participation in local movements was Champaran, Kheda, and Ahmedabad. Now, this period, as I've already told, that this period is described as the non-violent period, and he Gandhiji combined the two opposite views of constitutionalism and collective agitation, and followed a new method, that is a non-violent method, namely satyagraha, based on truth. Now he opposed actually the repressive Rowlatt Act, and asked the people to observe Hartal against it on March 30, 1919. And Gandhiji completely lost the faith in the benevolence of the British rule, and he launched non-violence movement on August 1st, 1920, and made for this he has made a world wind tour in different parts of the country along with Ali brothers, and he led several movements like non-cooperation movement, civil disobedience movement, and quit India movement, and strived for achieving independence to India. See, look at this slide. The non-cooperation movement was firmly launched on August 20, and during this period only Tilak has passed away, and in his place uh, Gandhiji has become an important leader. Okay, and the same actually the Indian National Congress, led by Lala Lajpat Rai, has adopted the resolution of non-cooperation movement at its Calcutta session in September 1920, and the same was approved in its regular session in December 1920. The Khilafat issue and the ruthless acts of the police at Jallianwala Bagh in Punjab were the main reasons for this movement, and the Nagpur session of Indian National Congress accepted Gandhiji's idea of non-cooperation against the British rule. Now, this movement was of two types, namely positive program and a negative program. In positive agenda, Actually, it includes collection of fund of rupees 1 crore in order to implement the non-cooperation activities. And uh, not only this, the distribution of 20 lakh charkhas to the unemployed Indians, because during those period they used to live on, most of the people used to live on cottage industries, right, small scale industries. So a distribution of nearly 20 lakh charkas to the unemployed Indians was an agenda, a positive agenda, right. And then formulation and implementation of national education plans. See, education has played an important role in enlightening the masses who were under the control of the British imperialism and colonialism. So, through the education, they want to bring a strong system or strong structure to the Indian nation, and the settlement of disputes through private organization by boycotting government courts. Right. So private organizations have to be set up in all, because of Swadeshi, and because of the boycott of British government courts. And not only that, establishing Congress legislative bodies in place of British legislative bodies, and use of Swadeshi goods, and negative program under a non-cooperation movement was renouncing the British titles and honorary offices, and abstaining from the government organized meetings and programs, because earlier whichever the meeting was organized by the British was used to be attended by the Indian masses in the hope that they would brought some positive reforms to the people of India. But after their domination and control, they completely lost the faith in the British government. So they wanted to abstain from the government organized meetings and programs, and boycott of British courts, and the process of election to legislative bodies, and resignation of membership in local bodies. Now, the leaders as well as the people have obliged the two programs which were listed as positive and negative, and Gandhiji renounced his British title Kaiser-e-Hind. Okay, and eminent advocates like Motilal Nehru, Chittaranjan Das, Rajendra Prasad, Raja Gopalachari, Tanguturi Prakasham, and others also boycotted the British courts. Students all over the country left their educational institutions and joined the national movements. See, there was complete support by the masses in this movement, we can say. The Congress leaders and voters also boycotted the elections which were held to various legislative assemblies under the Government of India Act 1919, and picketing was organized before the shop selling foreign goods, and the people uh, have become more agitative and burnt out the foreign goods. Leaders like Duggirala Gopala Krishnaya have refused to pay taxes and left their village, and the people of Bombay also boycotted the visit of Prince of Wales. The British government has imposed severe restrictions and imprisoned several leaders. It also prohibited wearing of Gandhian caps. When the movement was at its peak, an unhappy violent incident took place on 5th February 1922 at Chauri Chaura in Gorakhpur district. This you need to remember, students, that where does Chauri Chaura incident took place and in which year. Okay, so it took place, the Chauri Chaura incident took place in Gorakhpur district, that is in Uttar Pradesh, on 5th February 1922. And at this juncture, what happened, an angry mob of the village burnt alive 20 policemen, including the sub-inspector. Gandhiji was very much shocked by this incident and un- and announced unilaterally the suspension of this movement because of the Chauri Chaura incident, and the British government sentenced Gandhiji for this incident for 6 years imprisonment and released him in February 1924 on the grounds of health. Later on, Gandhiji tried to sort out the differences between the two groups in Congress, Swarajis and Gandhians. So, this is actually the third phase of Indian national movement, and we need to discuss other movements that have been taken part as of the Gandhian movement, like emergence of Swaraj Party, Simon Commission, Nehru Report, civil disobedience movement, that is in 1932 to 1934, and it has different phases, first phase, second phase, and the last phase, and we need to discuss August offer and the Cripps proposal, Wavell Plan 1945, Cabinet Missions Plan 1946, Direct Action, Interim Government, Attlee Declaration, Mountbatten Plan. So this we will discuss in the other class, right, students? So thank you very much.